Hey guys, how you doing? Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparin. I believe this show is called The Young Turks. So what do we have on tap for you guys today? Nothing but awesomeness throughout the network, of course. Today we shoot TYT Classics. You guys get it tomorrow if you're members. TYT.com/join. Have I told you that before? And then on Rebel headquarters tonight, Pramila Jayapal, one of the most progressive members of Congress and one of the few just Democrat incumbents. And she's the one that started the Medicare for All caucus and PAC. I love that story. We're going to talk to her on Rebel headquarters tonight. Get all 18 Young Turks shows if you're a member. And then later tonight, two stories that have got me animated. Well, three actually, and I'm going to be presenting those. One is a story that we broke about Rick Scott's corruption. I mean, it's not just about Rick Scott. It is a perfect story of how our system is broken. So don't miss that one. And also, Politico's at it again. Complete attack on Bernie Sanders. And there's a trick in there that I need to tell you about. You need to understand, okay? Do not fall for that trick, okay? And then my old friend, here come Ojeda.
Ojeda is the only person who's giving me life right now, and he doesn't even know it.
He doesn't even know
No.
it. Okay, so remember how I told you I didn't look up the polls on purpose for that story? I looked them up now. And so, interesting.
Let's just get through all this other stuff really quickly.
Just to get to Ojeda, right?
Yeah.
And there's another ad where he's bleeding. Okay.
He's amazing. It's amazing.
I told Ann, I almost texted her last night, going, shame on you, Carol Miller.
How dare you?
No, that's what it was.
Yeah,
How dare you, Carol Miller? Okay. Anyway, we got more of that a little bit later in the program. Okay.
Yes.
But Anna, take it away.
All right, so.
Actually, yeah.
Two quick things that I wanted to talk to you guys about before we get started with the stories. First, one of our members had written on, I think online, a question about why it is that I call out some of the graphic numbers sometimes. I don't do it all the time, I do it time to time. And I wanted to answer that question for anyone who's curious about it. So as you guys know, this show is not scripted, there's no teleprompter. And while you guys see us on a daily basis doing the work, there are angels in the background who are doing a lot of really hard work behind the scenes. Those are our crew members and producers. Oftentimes, I will go out of order when I'm presenting a story and presenting certain graphics. And so I don't want to confuse the crew. I want to make sure they know what I'm about to toss to. And that's why sometimes I mention the graphic number if I'm going out of order. So that's one thing.
Okay, I'd like to note, angels, a bit overstated.
No, but they work really hard, and it's a difficult job because remember, every other news show's scripted, so whoever's directing knows exactly what they're gonna do next. Whereas with our show, it's a spontaneous conversation, and sometimes I'll toss to a video or a graphic, and they'll have no warning. So that's basically what's going on.
Okay, I don't know about angels, but I know Jesus is back there.
Jesus is back there. Yeah.
All right, what's next?
And then one other quick thing. So Ann Coulter backed out of a debate with Kyle Kulinski because she's a coward. And she was recently interviewed on Fox 11 here in Los Angeles, and she thought that she would take a little dig at me because she claims she's written a bunch of books and I haven't. Right?
You do nothing else with your life.
Okay.
And a bunch of rich people buy your books in bulk. It's totally fake.
Yeah, here's the thing. Your books didn't help you as I was handing you your own ass during the debate last year. So please spare me your ridiculous books with countless falsities.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to respond to that quickly.
So that just got dropped.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clown.
How dare you, Ann Coulter?
Okay, now with that all out of the way, let's get to the news.
All right.
Okay. The Washington Post has published the final column written by Jamal Khashoggi. It was written by Khashoggi, but his assistant has published it. And the message in this column is incredibly important because he is specifically calling out the lack of freedom of expression in Arab countries. And it gives you a sense of what his thoughts were not only as he was living in self-exile here in the United States, but as he was entering that consulate, the issues that he had, in the back of his mind when it came to the very country that he was from. So I want to give you a few excerpts from his column and then we'll discuss. So in one portion of the column, he says there is only one country in the Arab world, and here he's referencing a 2018 Freedom in the World report. He says, there's only one country in the Arab world that has been classified as free. That nation is Tunisia. Jordan, Morocco, and Kuwait come second with a classification of partly free. The rest of the countries in the Arab world are classified as not free. So as you can notice there, he does call out Saudi Arabia as not free because it's not listed as partly free or free. And then he says, a state-run narrative dominates the public psyche, and while many do not believe it, a large majority of the population falls victim to this false narrative. Sadly, this situation is unlikely to change. So he's specifically referring to the state-sponsored propaganda in Arab countries. And Saudi Arabia is certainly no exception. The Saudi royals want to control the narrative and the messaging that the Saudi citizens consume. And so that is the main reason why someone like Jamal Khashoggi, who was highly critical of the Saudi royals, decided to live in self-exile here in the United States.
Yeah, so look, obviously this is incredibly powerful because it comes from the grave. And they noted in the Washington Post that they did not want to run it because they hoped he was still alive. But now that hope has basically been extinguished. So they're running it posthumously. And I want to call out one other thing that he said in the article that I think is really important. He mentioned Saleh al-Sheikhi, who's a prominent Saudi writer who's now, he said, serving an unwarranted 5-year prison sentence for supposed comments contrary to the Saudi establishment. Now, of course, we now know that Jamal Khashoggi was very likely murdered by that same Saudi establishment. I say very likely because you have to, but we know what happened. And so I noted something that I have not seen elsewhere, but I hope that others are pursuing this. My guess is human rights groups are, et cetera, that Saleh al-Sheikhi is still alive. So if you want justice for Khashoggi, a very small step in that direction, but a good step would be to release him from prison. That's the bare minimum that the Saudi government can do.
Exactly. So other portions of his piece that I wanted to share with you, he says Arab governments have been given free rein to continue silencing the media at an increasing rate. There was a time when journalists believed the internet would liberate information from the censorship, but these governments have aggressively blocked the internet. And I appreciate that he mentioned that. And he specifically goes back to 2011 when there was this emergence of people who were protesting and really challenging people in positions of power in the Arab world. And there was that glimmer of hope. I remember that. And then it just kind of faded away as those movements got co-opted by terrorist organizations, as the leaders in these countries became even more aggressive in censoring speech, censoring non-state sponsored media. And again, this is exactly the type of commentary that would get him murdered in Saudi Arabia, which is why he came here to the United States and became a US resident.
So the part about the internet's really important, and I really hope that VPNs are successful in getting around these restrictions. Because if you don't know what a VPN is, it allows your computer to go to another computer so they can't tell that you're, and one outside the country. So you can actually access some of the websites that are banned in places like Saudi Arabia because it appears that your computer is in the Netherlands, not in Saudi Arabia. Now this is really taking off in China, and I hope it does so even more so in all those places to get around the censorship of these oppressive governments. But I didn't want to breeze past the first part of that sentence. He said Arab governments have been given free rein to continue silencing the media at an increasing rate. I mean, and that turned out to be his last column as they silenced them in the most extreme way imaginable. And so as I read that portion, it was haunting that he was warning about silencing of the media and they literally beheaded him.
Also, I mean, he says Arab governments have been given free rein. given free reign from whom, right? And
by whom?
By whom? Yeah.
Yes.
And it's
the U.S.
The U.S. exactly, and that's exactly what's happening right now. I mean, the narrative that we're seeing from the Trump administration, and later we'll also talk about some conservatives in the United States who are part of the media. Like, they're making excuses for what happened, and they're protecting the Saudis and what they did.
No, I mean, look, I'll just mention it briefly here. I asked yesterday, will the MAGA guys rally to Donald Trump defending a Muslim fundamentalist government dismembering someone? We got our answer today, yes. So now conservatives are starting to attack Khashoggi, the victim, calling him a radical Islamist. So the smear job on the victim has begun. We see that here in America all the time. You know, young unarmed black kids killed. It's time to smear him and destroy his reputation after you've already killed him. So now they've started to do that to Khashoggi.
So let me just ask a quick question. What type of radical extremist would want freedom of speech, freedom of press? Wouldn't a radical extremist want censorship? Wouldn't they want to prevent messages getting out there that counter whatever it is that they believe?
But look, you know, I'm going to offend people as usual here, but this is why I call those extreme Republican voters stupid, because there's nothing that they won't buy. All you have to do is you have to have an official propaganda outlet of the Republican Party tell them, oh yeah, no, Muslim fundamentalists beheading people and dismembering them is now great. Now you are to bow your head and say that that is wonderful. And here they are now all over the internet going, well, Khashoggi this and Khashoggi that, smearing him, etc. All lies, by the way, all totally out of context lies. And so they've decided, yeah, the right wing in this country that said all Muslims should be banned now think Trump covering up for a fundamentalist Muslim dictator beheading someone is a good thing. I would hope that they would read this and learn something from it, but they're not going to learn anything.
They'd have to read. They'd have to actually take the time to read something instead of sitting there and watching whatever propaganda they've been consuming, including Fox News. It's easy to sit there and just buy whatever it is that they're selling. But look, just for a second, take the Muslim component out of it and think about what this means. He was a US resident, okay? He was living here in the United States. He was murdered, likely murdered, when he went to that consulate. What does that mean for journalists who practice free speech in a country like the United States, who take advantage of our First Amendment rights and share their opinions, put out their articles or their news content? So we're just going to give certain countries a pass if they murder journalists just because we have cozy ties with them, just because we have financial ties with them?
Where's all my right-wing free speech advocate friends? Free speech on Berkeley's campus. Oh, you beheaded a guy who was speaking out against the Saudi government. No problem. Let's cover it up. Trump told us to cover it up. Let's cover it up. So, boy, you must be really proud of your free speech philosophy.
Well, the New York Times has more details on how Khashoggi was likely murdered, and I want to share these details with you guys so you understand the severity of what happened and what the Trump administration is planning on doing to cover this all up. All right. Turkish officials and investigators are slowly but surely leaking more details about how Khashoggi was allegedly murdered by Saudi officials. Now, Jamal Khashoggi was, of course, a US resident who was writing columns for the Washington Post. He was living in self-exile out of fear that the Saudi officials would come after him and murder him. And if we are to believe the Turkish investigators, Saudi officials did murder him as he was going into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Now, we're learning more details about how this murder was allegedly done, and it's very gruesome. So, according to the latest report in the New York Times, Saudi agents were waiting when Jamal Khashoggi walked into their country's consulate in Istanbul. Mr. Khashoggi was dead within minutes, beheaded, dismembered, his fingers severed, and within 2 hours, the killers were gone.
To me, the most troubling part, I mean, every part of it is horrifically troubling. They couldn't tell if his fingers were severed while he was alive or after he was dead. The head and the other limbs, that's what they brought the bone saw for, and presumably to be able to carry him away easier and conceal it. But the fingers, there's no reason to cut those after he's dead. Likely they cut him while he was still alive.
So the Turkish authorities say that they have audio recordings of what happened, and so as a result, they can hear who was present and what they said. Now, according to the New York Times, after Khashoggi was shown into the office of the Saudi consul, the agents seized Khashoggi almost immediately and began to beat and torture him, eventually cutting off his fingers. Again, we don't know if they cut off his fingers while he was alive or dead. Now, the consul was present, according to these audio recordings, and objected. He allegedly said, "Do this outside, you will put me in trouble." And one of the Saudi officials responded with, "If you want to live when you come back to Arabia, shut up."
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, "You must unlearn what you have learned." And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Remember, they're going to scapegoat somebody, right? Because the guy who very, 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 very likely ordered it is the leader of Saudi Arabia, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or now apparently Bonesaw Salman. And so they're not going to turn around and go, "Yeah, the monarch did it." That's not how monarchies work. So they'll have to say that they took stern action once they found out who the rogue killer was. So I don't know if they'll pin it on the consul because he objected for like 1 second in the middle of the murder about where they killed him, not whether they should kill him, or they'll pin it on somebody. And right now, everybody on that 15-person team has to be incredibly nervous because somebody's going to get scapegoated. And likely they'll kill that guy too because they don't want him hanging around even if it's in a Saudi prison because he knows the real story. So,
and remember, as we spoke about on a previous show, both the New York Times and Turkish investigators identified several of the 15 Saudi officials who were present. And so if people know who they are, and they also know that these individuals have close ties to the Saudi royals, who knows what's in the future for them? And it is a scary thing to consider. So another thing to keep in mind is that one of the Saudi officials who was there and who was ID'd was a Saudi doctor. He was a medical professional. And as the agents cut off Khashoggi's head and dismembered his body, the doctor did have some advice. He told them, listen to music as he donned headphones himself. That was what he did to ease the tension when doing such work, the doctor explained. And so the doctor had published work in dissection, so maybe that's what he was referring to there. But either way, it's just incredibly gruesome. And to know that the US government is gonna try to cover up for the Saudi officials or for the Saudi royals is incredibly discouraging and terrifying.
So a couple more things here. First of all, on the doctor, I don't know what, you don't get picked to be the doctor on the 15-person assassination team by accident. So it might have been autopsies he was referring to, or it might have been other beheadings. It's not like the Saudi government doesn't do beheadings, they do beheadings. they do real fundamentalist version of Sharia law. There's actually a lot of different variants of Sharia law, and some are benign and some are terrible. And the Saudi government practices the terrible kind, the same kind that ISIS practices. And we go, oh, we have to start a war with ISIS, and defense contractors got to get paid, and we got to cause chaos in the Middle East. Well, Saudi Arabia has very, very similar conduct as ISIS in terms of fundamentalist Sharia law, beheadings, public torture, etc., right? And oppression of anyone living under their rule. Incredibly similar ideology, but hey, they're an ally and they got oil and they back Israel and us against Iran. Wow. So understand what you're dealing with here. This is not likely to be the first time that a beheading has happened under the rule of Saudi Arabia in this particular reign. Okay, secondly, Anna mentioned the Turkish government doing slow leaks here. Why? Now, this is what other outlets can't really talk about. This is our analysis, but I will give New York Times credit for getting as close as they can. It's because the Turkish government has not received their end of the bargain. So I told you what the American government has gotten so far. The Turks gave us Pastor Brunson. The Saudis gave us $100 million that we asked for help in Syria. They all happened at the same time, and that's all we're told are coincidence. It's of course preposterous. There are deals being made behind the scenes to assuage the situation, but apparently the Turks have not, and I said yesterday on the show, so far publicly we haven't seen what the Turks have gotten, and they need to get something, and they're holding the audio recordings in their back pocket as leverage. You can see the show, yesterday's show, you can see me saying that. And today, they're leaking stuff because apparently they didn't get their end of the bargain. So I love what the New York Times said about it. They talked about how the investigators in Turkey are actually very well respected, and so is their intelligence organization. But the press, unfortunately, is not very free in Turkey. It used to be, but not under this current government. So then they explained that, quote, so the resumption of disclosures about Mr. Khashoggi's disappearance is more likely to reflect a decision by the Turkish president than a burst of muckraking zeal. That is exactly right. It isn't like, wow, we finally somehow got the leak. No, Erdogan's office comes in and goes, all right, they didn't give us the money we wanted or whatever it is that we wanted. Leak this part, leak that part. Tell them about the fingers, tell them about the beheading, because they have the tapes.
Right.
Okay, and they're holding on to the tapes as their last card. Look, if the Saudis don't give us what we want, whatever it is, we release the tapes. So that's the negotiation that's happening behind the scenes. And finally, there is one other negotiation going on, independent of this, but related to it. Our own TYT investigative reporting team broke the story that the State Department is actively seeking US contractors to aid Saudi Arabian prison officials.
Wow.
Oh boy. And so apparently this is for the female prisons. I hope we don't teach them to sever fingers while the people are still alive. I hope we don't teach them that any of this torture is acceptable. We've done torture in the past. I'm sorry, enhanced interrogation. Right? I guess Dick Cheney would also call this enhanced interrogation. You know, very enhanced interrogation, what happened to Khashoggi. So check out that story. We'll have a link down below for another great job by Ken Klippenstein on TYT Investigates. If we are giving aid and comfort to the Saudi government, whether it's in executing their war in Yemen, in covering up this crime, or training him on prisons, we should at a bare minimum reconsider that and for sure make absolutely positive that we're teaching them the right things. I mean, it's as I say it sounds preposterous. They're not gonna listen to any right things. It's a dictatorial government, but somebody's gonna make money off this contract. That's what's gonna happen.
We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will give you an example of a conservative commentator who is dragging Khashoggi through the mud and just making things up about him. Hey.
Hey, how you doing, guys? Some divergent opinions on the Washington Post story. Mathematician Me thought that they should not publish it, that it was profiting off of his death. I don't agree. That he said that on Twitter. Eclectic Miscellanea had a different idea, completely different idea, writing in the members section. How tragically ironic that Khashoggi's last piece was calling out the repressive nature of countries like Saudi Arabia. Remember Je suis Chalet? And that's my French, sorry guys. And news outlets around the world publishing the controversial Mohammed cartoon after the attacks in Paris, the Charlie Hebdo attacks. And wouldn't it be great, Jester, if news organizations around the world published the last article by Khashoggi to show we are all united for free speech?
That would be amazing.
I love that idea. I think that's a much better idea.
Just real quick, I want to respond to Mathematician. Look, under that logic, then it means any publication that has an obituary section is just profiting off of people's death. I don't see it that way. I think it's important to report these things, and I think that the message in Khashoggi's final column was an incredibly important message, and it's especially important given the way he's being slandered by conservatives right now in America.
Last comment is Gabby Marita says, "Why do we keep calling them Saudi agents? Call them what they are: assassins." I have on several occasions called them assassins, but I agree, Gabby, and it's mathematician.
Mathematician, what did I say?
Mathematician, which makes sense.
Oh.
Okay, all right. Look, guys, let's get some votes for show of the year. This is for the Streamies. It's gonna happen on Monday. On Saturday, we find out who wins news show of the year. Could be one of two shows, us or Breakdown in the TYT network, or it could be a non-Young Turks show, but you guys can't vote on that one. But you can vote on show of the year, and all you gotta do is tweet out hashtag TYT for Streamies. You can write anything you want, you can write nothing if you want. All you gotta do is include hashtag TYT for Streamies. Get conservatives to retweet it and it'll count as a vote as well. Okay, so last thing for now is the cruise. I wanted to give you an update on that. The ad we're running against Ted Cruz. Do we have the ad? It's just 23 seconds. I like showing it. Let's show it one more time.
This is Ted Cruz. That's him phone banking for Donald Trump after Trump called his wife ugly. Look at him. What kind of a man does that? Oh yeah, Trump also said his father was probably a murderer. He made calls on behalf of Trump after being unmanned by him. You're looking at the saddest man in America, Ted Cruz 2018. Pathetic.
No, you know what? I like it more every time.
I just like that pathetic part a lot. Like, it's really good.
Okay, so tyt.com/Cruz. Look, leaving it 100% up to you guys, and however viral it goes for how many ads we can buy. I got a bunch of good news though. First of all, we're at what, over $18,000 now. So I said, oh no, over $19,000. At 10,000, we do a Facebook ad buy, and at 20,000, we're gonna do a YouTube ad buy.
Wow.
I think that on YouTube, we're gonna get about 600,000 ad impressions, which could be up to 600,000 people in Texas seeing that ad for $10,000. That's a pretty good deal.
Damn.
So like the more there is, the more people in Texas see that ad, and the more they realize Ted Cruz 2018. Pathetic.
Donald Trump called his wife ugly.
Look at him. I had a little bit of fun recording that. All right, and by the way, if you like what we're doing, you like We're Home and Progressives, tyt.com/join, of course. And you could also donate at tyt.com/yes. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. John Miller is a White House reporter for CRTV. CRTV is a conservative online streaming network of shows, including Gavin McInnes, who also has a show. Now, John Miller went out of his way to slander a journalist who was just murdered by Saudi assassins in the Saudi consulate in Turkey. He's probably doing this because of the fact that it's become abundantly clear that the Trump administration is going to help cover up this death for the Saudis because of our financial ties with Saudi Arabia, but more importantly, because of Donald Trump's financial ties with Saudi Arabia. Now, with that said, I want to give you a sense of what John Miller had to say about Khashoggi on his show. He said, Miller referencing or referring to Istanbul as Constantinople, said the media is not telling the truth about Khashoggi. He then derided him as a radical activist. Fascinating.
Here, let's stop there. So the least offensive part is calling Istanbul Constantinople. It's silly, who cares, right? But I do want to. So I had a Greek friend in high school, and we were talking about. He used to call Istanbul Constantinople, and he'd kid me about it, and we had a great relationship. And then, but he said, yeah, like Greeks regularly do that, and then I was like, Constantine. Unsurprising that his name was Constantine. I was like, it hasn't been Constantinople for over 500 years. So can we call it the thing that the people who live there call it? He's like, that's fair. I'm calling it Istanbul from now on. Okay, so that's what a reasonable person does. Okay, again, not that important.
Yeah, that's a tangent.
Yes, the important stuff is what they're saying about Khashoggi. Now, as Anna reads you the propaganda that CRTV is putting out there, and so she mentioned Gavin McInnes, a guy who calls for violence and white and Western pride. So that's the kind of station CRTV is. So you understand. But now, since then, this is exactly what I expected. Everything that Anna's going to read you is bouncing around the internet. It has begun. So now the right wing and the MAGA guys have decided the Saudis dismembering people is awesome, and so they will now smear the victim. So
I'm going to give you exact quotes from the show. John Miller said the following: "We know he, meaning Khashoggi, had ties to the radical Islamic groups. They're not reporting that. We know he made calls for violence against Israel. We know that he was dedicated to transforming Saudi Arabia into a more regressive state. And maybe that's why he didn't come out of that consulate."
So there's 3 things here at a minimum, 4 actually. Maybe that's why he didn't come out of the consulate. In other words, he had it coming. They should have murdered him. That's what he's implying. It's unbelievable. Okay. Number 2, he was pushing for Saudi Arabia to be a more aggressive state. Not remotely true. 100% the opposite of the truth.
In what way was Saudi Arabia able to get more regressive? I mean, they decapitate people. I mean, they will decapitate people.
And they did it to Khashoggi.
They did it to Khashoggi. But more importantly, I mean, they have incredibly extreme laws, and especially toward women. If anyone is caught having an affair, if a woman is even caught seen with a man who's not her husband, I mean, how much more regressive can you possibly get? There's no freedom there, no freedom of press.
And besides which, Khashoggi was murdered because he was fighting to open up Saudi Arabia for liberty and for freedom of speech. His last article published today by the Washington Post, before he was killed, before he had any idea he was going to be killed, obviously, talking about how Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries have to be open to freedom and liberty, but the Republicans use freedom and liberty as a punchline. So now they've flipped it on his head and lied about his record. And then point 3, calls for violence against Israel. Now, I told you ahead of time, I said at some point, people are going to start to say, hey, remember Saudi Arabia's allies with Israel. Who cares who they murder and behead, etc. So now these are code words. Hey, remember, we're on the side of Saudi Arabia, and so they want to decapitate this guy. While he was against Israel, he was against Israel. Well, is that even true? No, I'm sure that he criticized the occupation, as almost every single person in the Arab world has done, right? And as any rational person would do. Is the occupation great? Are you happy about the occupation? Anyway, and then the last part, and the most important one, his ties to radical Islamic groups. Now, we're gonna have more quotes about that, but now it's easy. Oh, right, he's Arab, he's a Muslim. Let's just call him a radical. Let's just call him a terrorist sympathizer. Easy. And so the MAGA guys go, yeah! The guys who beheaded him are not the radical Muslims. The guy who got beheaded is the radical Muslim. Doesn't matter, he's a Muslim, who cares?
So he continues to say, Khashoggi was an Islamic activist who was tight with the Muslim Brotherhood. He was an extremist, guys, or at least I should say an extremist sympathizer, because he didn't want to do the bombs himself.
Okay. Again,
there's really no evidence at all to back up any of what he had to say. Again, he was living in self-exile in the United States, writing for the Washington Post because he feared for his own safety because of his criticisms of Saudi Arabia and how the royals refused to open the country up, as Cenk mentions. They refused freedom of speech. They refused any type of progress. Now, the Saudi crown prince recently gave women the right to drive. But that's a trick. I mean, it's a good thing to allow women to drive, but you have to pay attention to what he's doing in the backdrop, right? Because that was a way of putting up a facade, making it seem like he's trying to be more progressive, when in reality, that is not what's really happening.
At the same time, he imprisoned the women who fought for that freedom.
Exactly.
That's who Bonso Salman is, and the guy that these conservatives with no conscience whatsoever are defending today. Man, there is no bottom to this barrel. There's just no bottom. I don't know how anybody stays a right winger. So
is this the way he would respond to, I don't know, someone on the right who was targeted by Nicolas Maduro? Is this how he would respond? If someone on the right who is a harsh critic of Maduro was murdered by Venezuelan assassins, is this the way you would react to it?
No way. Of course not, because you're political hacks and you don't care about principle at all. And Anna made a point yesterday about how when Alex Jones attacked us during a live show we were doing at the RNC, he was yelling about how we like Saudi Arabia, and I yelled back, "Are you insane? You've never watched this show. Can't stand the fundamentalist government, the dictatorial government of Saudi Arabia." Well, guess who lived up to their principles and who didn't? So we're criticizing Saudi Arabia as fervently as any show on the planet. Right wing, where are you? Oh, you're defending them. Funny how that turned out.
He also said Khashoggi was a longtime friend of Osama bin Laden and wept when the Al-Qaeda founder was killed. So let's clarify that statement, okay? Khashoggi did in fact cry when Osama bin Laden was killed, but not because he was Osama bin Laden's friend, but because of what Osama bin Laden had become, okay? So Khashoggi had interviewed bin Laden in Afghanistan in the 1990s when both were allied with the anti-Soviet Mujahideen, okay?
If you thought that Khashoggi was wrong about that, so was Reagan. Reagan was the guy who armed Osama bin Laden at the time. Take it up with Reagan.
After 9/11, however, Khashoggi wrote, and this is his writing, these are his words, Osama bin Laden's hijacked planes not only attacked New York and Washington, they also attacked Islam and a faith and the values of tolerance and coexistence that it preaches, okay?
So clearly not in favor of bin Laden after the Mujahideen fight against the Soviet Union. 100% against them, saying he was the exact opposite of what Islam needs to be. And then the context for the tweet about crying.
All right, so here's the full context about the crying accusation. Here's what Jamal Khashoggi had written. I collapsed crying a while ago, heartbroken for you, Abu Abdullah, that's a nickname for bin Laden. You were beautiful and brave in those beautiful days in Afghanistan before you surrendered to hatred and passion.
So he was saying when we were fighting the Soviets, along with Ronald Reagan, you were great. And then you surrendered to hatred. And that's why I cry for what happened to you, okay? Funny that conservatives left that part out. It's almost as if they want to deceive their audience.
They will do anything to protect Trump, even knowing that Trump is only acting the way he is out of his own self-interest because he wants to protect his financial assets, his financial relationships. That's really, like, you're gonna go out of your way to help Trump protect himself and enrich himself? What are you getting out of it? Because what you're getting out of it is protecting this new precedent in response to journalists who question power and authority.
Okay, and finally, when you look at what these guys have done and you say, well, Cenk, that's not fair to say right-wingers in general, well, then I'll apply your own principles. You say about Muslims, well, hey, the moderate Muslims have to speak out, which, by the way, they do. After every attack, every Muslim American organization puts out a statement condemning it, and then they go, where are they? What did you put? They put out the statement, you didn't read it. So in this case, so where are the moderate right-wingers calling out these abhorrent comments by other parts of the right wing, calling out CRTV, calling out Donald Trump for an obvious cover-up? Are you guys vociferously attacking Donald Trump and criticizing him, saying, how dare you support that fundamentalist dictatorial government in Saudi Arabia? How dare you not stand up for someone who's a Washington Post journalist who was living here in America and who was beheaded and tortured? Are you doing that, right wing? Oh, no, you're not, huh? Funny. Funny how that works.
We got to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about actual extremists here in the United States.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. Colin in the members section has an amazing story. At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today. My buddy told me he was voting for Cruz, so I called his wife ugly and his dead father a criminal. He promptly knocked me square across my jaw. I don't know if this is true, but it's an amazing story if it is. Okay. After I got up, I said, now let me tell you something about Cruz. He changed his mind. Wow. Okay, that's taking one for the team, brother. You know, one of my favorite sayings of me is, it takes courage. It doesn't take courage to throw a punch. It takes courage to take a punch. Well, you took one for the team.
Oh my, but everyone put yourself in that position, right? Imagine the person you love the most. Like, I'm thinking of my husband, someone insulting my husband, and then later, me tucking tail and doing their bidding for them just because I want that Mercer money so badly.
And writing glowing things about him.
Oh, okay. No, not in a million years.
And, calling people and saying, he's really great. The guy who called my husband, whatever, fill in the blank. Yeah. He's a great person.
Oh, no.
Oh, Ted Cruz, pathetic. Anyway, Keith says, I would assume this type of killing was an acquiescence to Saudi by US prior to his killing. Intelligence agencies would have picked this up. Certainly Israel would have known as this event was happening. All right, Keith, no, half true, but be careful there, okay? So the US intelligence did know that the Saudis wanted to target Khashoggi and they did not warn him, and that is abhorrent, and we're not talking about it enough. They did not know, as far as we can tell from the leaks, that the Saudis wanted to kill him. So they thought maybe just kidnap him, and we didn't warn him, right? And in terms of the Israeli intelligence, we have no idea what they knew or didn't know, okay? So don't get too carried away on, that's too much speculation, okay? So Chris writes in, you know what disgusts me most? Why is it that other news outlets aren't calling people like Miller out for his atrocious and malicious propaganda? He's a White House reporter. Isn't that amazing?
I know, it is.
Young Turks is considered too biased to be in the White House. Not just by the Trump administration, by the Obama administration as well. But he's a White House reporter. And Chris continues, there's a reason why I watch TYT every day. It's the only place I know I can get current news and trust that it is relevant and the most important and honest news of the day. What is CNN talking and posting about right now? John Bolton and John Kerry get into a heated shouting match. Come on, who cares? Now look, people might care about that story, et cetera, but what the cable news guys do is they take one story that they think is hot and they talk about it for 24 hours. You got 24 hours, talk about other things.
Yes.
Right? So a last one is from Twitter. Bipolar Colbert writes in, the Christian right wing in the US is just jealous of the Saudi government. They wish they could institute religious law. Well, that's kind of literally true.
Yeah, they push for it all the time.
They say they don't want a separation of church and state. Saudi Arabia is their dream come true. Okay, what's next?
The New York Times is catching a little bit of heat, actually quite a bit of heat, after publishing a profile piece on Gavin McInnes. He is the founder of the Proud Boys, and they have been caught in a number of violent altercations throughout the country. One of the more recent altercations happened in New York following an event at the Metropolitan Republican Club. By the way, the Proud Boys were invited to the Metropolitan Republican Club to speak, and it all ended in violence when they were approached by Antifa protesters following the event. Now, I want to give you a few excerpts from what the New York Times wrote in its piece about McGinnis, and then I'll explain why they're getting criticized for it. So first part of it indicates that at the center of the fray on Friday night, this is referring to the altercation after the Metropolitan Republican Club event, was Mr. McGinnis, the founder of the Proud Boys and a former Brooklyn hipster turned far-right provocateur. So the concern here is that this piece profiling McGinnis is normalizing his behavior and also making it seem as though his behavior isn't out of the ordinary, essentially whitewashing it. When in reality, he has called for violence on various occasions, and we're gonna show you examples of that. Now, they also include this portion. Deborah Coughlin, the president of the Metropolitan Republican Club, said that she welcomed Mr. McGinnis because there had been no trouble when he spoke at the club last year. Coughlin explained that the club considered Mr. McGinnis's political views to be on the spectrum of conservative civil discourse. She also noted that during the event, his followers were quiet and respectful.
Now, after the event, they kicked the living crap out of people, as they've been taught to do. But hey, during the event, when they were all in agreement, everything was fine. And by the way, the part that is not mentioned often enough is what McGinnis was talking about that day. He went to go celebrate the murder of a Japanese socialist.
Civil discourse, Cenk.
Civil, very civil.
Yeah.
And he brought a plastic sword with him and dressed up, including with racist Asian eyes that he did for himself, okay, celebrating the person who murdered a socialist.
Civil discourse.
Civil discourse.
So anyway, there's more that I'm going to give you guys in just a minute, but there was also a video that went viral in response to this New York Times profile, and it's essentially a compilation of the type of civil discourse mainstream Republicans have now accepted. So let's show you what that is.
I started this gang called the Proud Boys. And
the Proud Boys?
The Proud Boys.
What's Proud Boys about?
We will kill you. That's the Proud Boys in a nutshell. We will kill you. We look nice. We seem soft. We have boys in our name. But like Bill the Butcher and the Bowery Boys, we will assassinate you. Now, part of the reason I agree to do the talk is because I'm allowed to bring all my guys. And we can fight our way in and fight our way out. I think it's our job to do it. And the cops to turn a blind eye. If you're wearing a MAGA hat, as Sal is right now. Sal's in the studio, folks.
Oh my God, it's Sal Cipolla. Where are you from?
On here.
Wow, you came a long way.
If you're wearing a MAGA hat and some guy with a slightly punk demeanor comes up to you and says, hey, are you Sal or are you pro-Trump? Choke him. Trust your instincts. Don't listen to what he has to say. Choke him. If I do a video where I say, how about we start throwing bricks? Is that legal? You can't call for violence on a specific person, but can you say they're throwing bricks? We should throw bricks. Can you call for violence generally? Because I am. Fighting solves everything. We need more violence from the Trump people. Trump supporters. Choke a mother... Choke a bitch. Choke a tranny. Get your fingers around the windpipe. I want violence. I want punching in the face. I'm disappointed in Trump supporters for not punching enough. Get a gun. Get ready to blow someone's head off. I've even killed people in my dreams. That's how awesome my gun is.
Get in trouble, get arrested, get fired. Let's all get in this together. They can't kill us all.
Yeah, I got green tips, man. Those go through at least 3 bodies.
Oh, beautiful. Plop. I love the way he falls on his ass.
They said, you want to go? I said, yeah, I want to go. And I punched him in the face. And then Coulter emailed me later and she goes, conservatives never punched anyone in the face. Finally, things are turning around.
And then Malsberg goes, you're not advocating violence, are you? And I go, I absolutely am. It's a wonderful, effective thing.
This is a
I started this gang called the Proud Boys.
Civil discourse.
The New York Times said provocateur. And my particular favorite, they described him as an angry nerd aesthetic. Oh, now he's a nerd. Oh, he's an innocent little nerd with an aesthetic, which is take your guns, kill people. I'm calling for violence. Punch them in the face, throw the bricks, etc. You just saw the tape. New York Times journalists thought, yeah, on the other hand, I'm supposed to call everything 50-50.
That's right. That's
because people like Kevin McGinnis yell at me and call me liberal media. So instead, I'll go and pleasure them. I'll talk about how they're Brooklyn hipsters. Oh, they're having a little bit of cheeky fun. Oh, they said, oh, they get together and do private jokes. Oh, they're just joking around. And in another instance, they talked about how he gets close to the line, but walks it back, just enough room to declare it all a joke. You just saw the tape. Did any of that look like he was joking? Did it look like it was enough room there when he talked about murdering people? But New York Times, no, we're not liberal. Okay, New York, right wing, wonderful, awesome, great. You're an intellectual dark web. You're a wunderkind. You're this, you're that. Kevin McGinnis, you're not a fascist. You're not talking about killing transgender people. You're not talking about killing liberals. No, we're gonna cover up for you just so you don't call us liberal. That's what the New York Times is. Honestly, they're cowards. So look, the New York Times also, because we're fair and we actually analyze things without what the right wing does, they have nothing but propaganda. They're nothing but lies. But the New York Times does some great reporting. And they have some wonderful reporters and wonderful editors, and they bring us incredibly important information. But they are cowed by the right wing. They had an article about Donald Trump before the election that showed Eric Lichtblau, a great reporter. He had him, Trump's server, talking to the Russians, talking to Alpha Bank. And not only did they not run that piece initially, but when someone else was gonna beat him to the punch, they wrote a piece with a headline saying the opposite, that the FBI had cleared Trump, when that's a lie. Why? Don't call us liberal, whatever you do, don't call us liberal. So what will we do? We'll lie to you and we'll call it even. We'll call everything even. They're calling fascist even. That's what the New York Times is doing. They're goddamn cowards. So look, I'm not for Antifa going out and throwing water bottles as they did in that. I'm not calling for violence. Yes, I'm angry. I don't know if you could tell. That doesn't mean we call for physical violence. We do everything to make sure our side does not do that. I say if you're a progressive, you're by definition wrong if you do anything physical or violent. But then they'll take this and you know what they'll do? Because they are cowards in the media, they will go and say, oh, well, that guy's angry about the fascists, that they want to murder people. That guy's angry, and he calls for a political answer to that. I'll call him the same as the monsters on the right who tell people to kill people. That's what you're gonna do, aren't you, New York Times? Go ahead, write it down. But you won't even do that. We did an analysis the other day. They have over 500 articles about the right wing, like specific right wing outlets in 1 month. You know how many articles they wrote about Amy Goodman, a wonderful progressive who is very popular and does a huge show? Zero.
Of course.
Amy, progressives. That's what New York Times thinks about progressives, and then they get called liberal media. When you ever cover progressives, when are you ever fair to progressives? All I ever see from the mainstream media is spitting on Bernie Sanders and any other progressive. When did you cover Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez before her victory? No, you thought she was a joke, right? Until she won, and then all of a sudden you turn around. But when it comes to the right wing and fascists who want to murder people, oh, provocateur, an angry nerd, aesthetic. Please, why don't you go pleasure another right winger? You sicken me. Am I clear enough?
So obviously you have an establishment political organization, a Republican organization, normalizing this behavior and calling it civil discourse. And the problem is we now have a major newspaper that is helping them make that argument. And I just want to read you one final part and then we'll call it a day with this story.
No, I'm gonna say more because.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so this is again from this very New York Times piece. By the way, Alan Feuer is the name of the writer here. And so Again, I want to emphasize that there is incredible journalism being done at the New York Times, but there is this fear of being called out by conservatives for being too liberal. And I think that we see this play out more often than not in the profiles that they write on people like McGinnis. So here's another portion. McGinnis, a fiscal conservative and libertarian, calls himself a champion of Western values and reserves a burning ire for the political correctness of people on the left whom he describes as busybodies who have lost their sense of humor. So were we supposed to laugh when you talked about choking trannies? Grabbing them by the windpipe? I mean, I don't know. I don't really find that funny. And then these are the same people who will then turn around and look at undocumented immigrants, Mexicans, Muslims, other minorities, and accuse them of being violent. They'll accuse them of being criminals. They'll accuse them of wanting to come into the country and destroying our values. No. McGinnis, I don't care, what your race is, you destroy our values.
So, New York Times and the rest of the mainstream media and the corporate media, when you call things even, you know what you do? You help liars. Because your job is to be objective. Your job is to get at the truth. But when you equate lies and the truth, and you say, well, Republicans say this and Democrats say that. Right wing says this and left wing says that. I mean, how would I know? What am I, a reporter? And when you just leave it at that, what do? You've equalized the truth and lies. So what did you do? You helped the liars by calling it even. That's terrible journalism. That means you're terrible at your job, okay? Now, in this case, you're helping fascists by calling it even. Okay, here, I'm gonna read you another quote, and I know there's not a lot of Indians in this country, so I'm sure that most people don't care. They're like, oh, casual racism and bigotry towards Indians, Asians, Muslims, transgender people. Oh, angry nerd aesthetic, right? So I'm gonna read you a quote from McGinnis. It's not, so he said, we brought roads, and referring to white people, we brought roads and infrastructure to India, and they are still using them as toilets. Our criminals built nice roads in Australia, but Aboriginals keep using them as a bed. So, you don't know any Indians, and you think, making fun of Indians. He's just joking. By the way, some of those clips were on the Joe Rogan show. Oh, let's bring them on. Let's just joke around about how much we hate transgender people. Oh, you don't have any sense of humor, man. Really, are you friends with Indian people and you guys are ribbing each other? No, it doesn't look like it. It looks like you're making fun of them because you hate them and you celebrate being white, whatever that means, okay? So anybody who enables these guys, including the New York Times, understand what you're doing. You're helping fascists by not calling them what they are, which is what you're supposed to do as reporters. What you do is you're dressing them up and making them seem much nicer and kinder than they actually are, which then helps them gain legitimacy and then have speeches at official Republican outlets and encourages the spread of their violence and hatred. Congratulations, New York Times. You must be so proud.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, more news for you, including white supremacists chugging milk because they think that makes them better than everyone else.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.